up until social media, you literally had to just go and meet business owners at their shops. Yeah. Right, like that's the only way. Or you might have met them at a local gathering, or you take your kids to footy or something. Oh, you own a business too? Oh shit, so do I. Oh my god, this is amazing.
Hey, you own a business? Yeah, I own a business too. Cool.
Yeah, but it's almost like that evolution of entrepreneurship, and it's done two things. I think one is it's really been able to bind and bond entrepreneurs together in a really good way, but it's also created this thing that I think entrepreneurship is, and I've talked about this a fair bit with other successful business owners and so forth, and it's that, well, especially who are in the market of entrepreneurs and coaching and all of that, there's entrepreneurship's made to be sexy almost, where it's like, oh cool, I want to be an entrepreneur now, versus going, well, do you really know what you're getting into? And I mean, you would see that more than most, because all day, every day, you guys are dealing with people who are either aspiring to be an entrepreneur, or they are what I'd call an accidental entrepreneur. They own a business and, they're like, oh, now I need to grow up, but I don't really feel like I'm the person to be able to do it. Like you come across a whole, wide variety of different people. What do you think about the rise of entrepreneurship?
Well, it's been super interesting for me, because how I got into the whole space was, I did the typical, went to school, went to high school, studied hard, got into a commerce degree, which is like the path that you did now more than 20 years ago, which is
feeling old.
Easy to say. But so I got in this commerce degree and I freaking hated it.
Yeah.
Like I had no idea. I'm like, where's this taking me? I don't understand like why I'm learning stuff. So I started working in hospitality at the same time. So I deferred that course for a year, ended up going working full time for this really big catering company in Melbourne for like several years, which I loved. I think everyone should have a background in hospital. Like you learn how to hustle, you learn how to think on your feet. It's a constant state of chaos. So it's like how you're about to learn. But then I was like, it was still back in the day where you had to you really were supposed to do a uni degree. Yeah. That was the path. And so I started looking around, and there was this brand new degree from RMIT down in Melbourne, a Bachelor of Entrepreneurship. And it was the only one in Australia. I must have started it in 2002. Like I was the first or second year even intake that they had. And so I started studying this entrepreneurship degree, which is totally different to our understanding of the entrepreneurial process now. It was basically a degree on writing a business plan. But still, it was excellent. And I got to meet all these entrepreneurs. But people were like, what do you mean you're studying entrepreneurship? Like, because the only entrepreneurs that Australians knew, because this was pre-Facebook, pre-YouTube, pre this whole tech scene that's happened.
In the early 2000s.
Yeah. And so the only entrepreneurs that Australians knew were Christopher Skase and Alan Bond, who are like two old 80s, 90s corporate raiders that pissed off with everyone's money. And so they're like, you want to be like them? And I'm like, well, I'm not saying no. But back, this is only that. Now, by the time I finished that course, 2005, and I launched my first business, just the concept of being an entrepreneur in Australia was super foreign. Like it just wasn't something that people thought was a real pathway. And then all the tech startup scene happened. And so you had, first of all, like YouTube, and I mean, Facebook, I think had been kicking around for a little bit, started taking off. You had the whole Silicon Valley scene start up. E-commerce players started coming in. And so even I myself started getting really interested in that technology entrepreneurship thing.
Right.
Totally encapsulated in movies like The Social Network, the Facebook movie. But it did start a little bit of I think a false narrative around entrepreneurship. It's kind of like, you have a great idea, you hack all night, you raise a ton of money, and then it's global domination.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, I want a bit of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
so that's kind of where it's come from. It's like people, it has been romanticized a little bit, the whole Silicon Valley, tech startup, super scalable, venture capital backed.
Yeah.
Which is really, venture capital backed is kind of like you haven't figured out a profitable business model yet. So there is a little bit of that romantic view of the entrepreneurial journey, which some people certainly like. Yeah, some people certainly need to learn that it's not going to be all roses, rainbows, unicorns.
Yeah.
That's one group.
Just on that, do you feel that you've had a very different path of entrepreneurship, I feel. you know, especially in myself. Like I've got a total different narrative to that. And, you know, so essentially you came into the Entourage as a general manager. Is that where you came in at? Because
I joined as the head of product, basically.
Okay, that's right.
Training and delivery. Because my background was, so I did that entrepreneurship degree.
Yeah.
But even back then there wasn't much like entrepreneurial stuff going on.
Right.
And so there was a lot more focus on corporate entrepreneurship or innovation. And so my first business that I launched was an innovation business for large businesses. So we'd go into like banks and utilities and all these big, slow-moving behemoths.
Yeah.
Help them develop new products, new services, improve the way they did things. And so that was Dynamic Horizons. So I ran that for 6-7 years or so.
Right.
Along the journey there, I had a little detour into a whole bunch of other little side hustles and businesses. From I wanted to get into e-commerce, so we did the Pantless Postman, the underwear subscription business. Had another half a dozen businesses that I think we kind of prototyped, spun up, and never saw the light of day.
I never got that. I actually never knew that part about you. So, you actually do have a lot more of an entrepreneurial sort of entry than I probably assumed, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I did. After that, I started working a little bit at the kind of bigger end of town. Like I was through the innovation business. I did a lot of work with Cisco and their innovation hub, spinning out some new tech. Then I ended up totally at random, almost meeting the Uber team as they were launching here in Australia, or sussing out Australia. So I jumped on board to help launch Uber in Melbourne back in 2013, 2014. At the same time, though, my business, Dynamic Horizons, was kind of morphing into an education development business. Right. We started, as any true entrepreneur, so I started teaching a little bit at RMIT, innovation entrepreneurship to these final year fashion students. And they came to me one year and they're like, hey, we really need to do some online education. You know about computers and stuff. Can you do it? And the entrepreneur in me is like, okay, so wait a minute. Have you got budget?
Of course I can.
They're like, yeah, we've got budget. I'm like, you've got budget. You don't quite know what you need, but you're pretty sure I'm your guy. And they're like, yes. I'm like, I'll do it. And so we started kind of going down the e-learning pathway.
Right.
And I ended up, so Dynamic Horizons actually we wound that up, but it morphed into Learn Lab. And so Learn Lab was my next proper business that I ran from my, 2008, 9-ish started through to like early, like 2013, 14, even that kind of period. And that was making educational content for, universities, large education institutions, to try and help them kind of embrace technology.
Yeah.
So then by the time I landed with the Entourage, it was like those two things, two streams, entrepreneurship and education, kind of fusing into one. Was amazing.
What made you wrap up that and then move into another organization that you didn't create?
Yeah,
because that's an interesting thing for me. Because for me, and again, it's my own story, and I'm sure I could probably change it, but I'm unemployable.
Yeah.
Right. So
I believe you.
Well, thanks. I'm glad we got that sorted. So that's true. That's a fact. But you're definitely employable. You're a super smart dude. What made you go from running your own business to now you're being a part of a business?
Yeah. Well, it was kind of it was just opportunity. And so what happened was it kind of kicked off in the Uber thing, right? So I was in with Uber. We launched in Melbourne. I still had Learn Lab running, and Uber just truthfully just didn't mesh with me when I was there. So there was it was early, right? It was still Uber Black. Uber X didn't even exist.
Yeah.
Big rounds of funding hadn't come. Still sub 200 employees. Went and spent a bit of time over in San Fran. But it just wasn't my kind of place. Like, there's a lot of which I don't know if anyone's ever followed the Uber story closely, but it all came out in the wash a couple of years ago when Travis Kalanick got ousted, the founder got ousted of the business. And there was a big review on the culture was just super Silicon Valley, win at all costs. We're here to crush the competition.
Right.
And we'll crush everyone on the way through as well. And a lot of dodgy shit was happening. They were getting, they were not playing nice. And so I was like, I don't think that's really for me. And I had the opportunity for my now wife and I to go traveling for a year. So we packed up and went around the world for a year. And so I was still running Learn Lab, doing that. I was trying to actually, I'd read, we'd all read the 4-Hour Work Week, all the traveling entrepreneurs.
Fucking how many people have Tim Ferriss fucked up? I'm going to set an automated email up, so I'm going to go on holiday, have this automated email saying, sorry, I check my emails once a week. Here you go.
I mean, I was a fair bit further down the path than that. I like, oh yeah, I'll just do an hour or two work every morning. And I had a team of like 30, pretty much all like contractors and structural designers from all around the world working on different projects. Like, yeah, I'll just work for an hour, get it running, and then figure out when I get back. And that's not how business works, right? Like, jobs would come in, you'd want to chase down some work, and by like halfway through this trip, I was doing like, luckily I get up early, but I'd be doing 5 hours work every morning before we'd even trek out and see stuff. And Claire was getting a little bit fed up with that. So I had to kind of like, if I wanted to keep traveling, I had to really kind of scale it back a little bit. So then when we landed back in Melbourne that time, I actually ended up jumping on and helping a couple of bigger, I was already moving, so less the universities, more entrepreneurial businesses in education. I did a couple of big like consulting gigs for them. And then I just came across the Entourage again. I'd met the Entourage years earlier at one of the first unconventions.
Yep. Just
met the guys kind of randomly and started having a bit of a chat. And they're like, hey, we're looking for someone to really take our product to the next level. And so it was a bit of a decision, really. It's like which do I think I want to keep doing the journey that I've been doing, which is comfortable, could scale it, or can I jump on a rocket ship? And it's kind of the nexus of it. The thing that I missed in Learn Lab and the consulting business is you're mainly working. Like there's not much to the internet there.
Yeah.
Whereas with us, we've got members, customers coming through the door like all day. Much closer to the entrepreneur, which is just that's a reason for doing it.
Yeah. It's I say the reason why we started Klaxon is instead of me going out building 100 new businesses myself, we get to vicariously help build everyone else's business and be really close to it, and we know what the results are, and we're like, all right, what do we get today? What was the weekend look like? Where are we scaling? How'd that campaign go? So I'm technically, not actually, but I'm running dozens of webinars. I'm selling hundreds of thousands of products every single week, right? And I realize that for me, the beautiful part about entrepreneurship for me is that the ability to solve a problem and win, right? Which ultimately winning means, serving customers being served. The business owner finally gets to see what this whole entrepreneurship really is, right? Because I think you have a moment as an entrepreneur where you're like, fuck, is this ever going to work? This is tough. This is like, this isn't what I got sold into. Like for me, I remember that moment where it was online marketing, which really sort of was my entry point into entrepreneurship. I always knew at the heart I was an entrepreneur. I'd always had entrepreneurial tendencies, and I'd always done things that entrepreneurs would do. But it was when I found the internet and the ability to sell online products, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is my gateway into the world now, right?
Yeah, interesting. And was it actually, did you have a moment where you're like, wow, this is really the opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember it so vividly. I was because I was a personal trainer at the time, right?
Yeah.
So I moved from New Zealand to Australia. Well, I'll give the quick one. I know you know it a little bit, but I was a cabinet maker by trade. So kicked out of high school, spent like 6 years as a cabinet maker, made my way up through the ranks to the point where they were trying to, groom me to buy the business and be the next owner. I was like, there's no way I want to be here forever. So then I decided to go to university because I thought, well, nothing else for me to do. I call it my gap year. I spent 1 year there because that's all I lasted. I was like, this is a joke. And then I came over to the Gold Coast, Australia. So that's where 2008 I moved here, and I was a personal trainer. Started working at the gym, and quite easily call it the gift of the gab, or just my relentless ability to keep pestering people until they became a client of mine. Either way, that's called sales. I built up a client base pretty quickly, But again, I got to that point where I was like, I don't feel like this is what I should be doing, right? There's so much more. Because when I feel constraints, when I get to a point where I feel there's massive scale ability constraints, I get restless, right? So I knew that I could only train maximum like 40 people one-on-one in a week. Like 40 hours as a personal trainer one-on-one is the most exhausting thing you can do, right? And I'd come from working 70 hours a week as a cabinet maker. So I knew what long hours and hard labor was like, but this was just a different beast. And I was like, okay, so I can only have 40 clients. Well, I could do 2-on-1 training or small group training. And that's why I built the franchise, right, that we did. Because I was like, well, we could have 100, 200 people at each location, right, training in groups versus, one-on-one. But it was when I walked past my roommate's computer one night and I literally looked at the screen. I was like, what's that? And she goes, oh, it's a workout program. I just bought it. And she paid $37 for a PDF document of a guy just with some static photos of showing her how to do some exercise. I was like, holy shit.
Wow.
That was the moment. I was like, what the? So I became, and this was 2008, right, when ebooks were just sort of starting to be a thing. And I just became obsessed with figuring it out, trying to figure out how to do it.
Cool.
And that just led on to everything.
I don't think I've had too many like those absolute moments of realization of wanting to go down a new path. But the path that has kind of led me here has been full of some changes of tact. So kind of like I've always been like pretty open to like, let's just try it out and go along with it, right? If I can't do that, like, starting the innovation consulting business, I was pitching to companies to hire me as their innovation manager, which they'd never done that before.
Yeah.
And so of course no one was going to hire me for that until someone's like, oh, can you do it consulting? And reading between the lines. So like if what I was saying wasn't working, they could just get rid of me.
Yeah.
And boom, business comes out of that, right? And then with jumping on with Uber, it was like just meeting them and they're like, hey, we're looking for someone to lead it up here. And I'm like, I know people that kind of fit that bill, send me the details. And they're like, oh, wait a minute, I'd like to do this. And then doing that first e-learning gig, it's like, well, maybe you can do it. I'm like, absolutely, I can do it. And then, moving up to join the Entourage, like we'd only just landed back in Melbourne after a year overseas. I'd been there for a couple of months and I'm like, I think maybe taking this gig up in Sydney is the right thing to do. It took a little while to convince my now wife for that, but and then it took an engagement and a marriage to get her up here. She's a good negotiator, much better than me. Absolutely. And so it's kind of like, I haven't had too many like, wow, this is the future moments. Yeah. But I've had a lot of like, oh, that's an interesting opportunity and I really think I should chase it moments.
That's a good point. I want to stick with that for a second because I think it's something that I think COVID right now, this situation has been the ultimate reset for business owners. It's given them an opportunity now to go, hey, check yourself right now. Is this the business that you actually want to be in? Is there a different path that you had previously prior to this going, man, I'd love to try this or do this? Like, you're not going to get a bigger sign than this from the universe to go, hey, maybe this isn't it, right? So I've had an interesting journey where I literally had and it came out of more of, I had opportunity there, so the next thing sort of took off, right? So what started with me just wanting to create online workout programs so I could live anywhere in the world, work in my undies on a laptop, drinking bloody, the best scotch, the best scotch ever. Yeah. But that vision that initially came out, once I uncovered the ability to be able to help and provide for millions of people around the world, that was like, okay, I was faced with an opportunity of, I've had too many things I could do. So I was like, let's build a franchise. Let's build a fitness college. Let's build a supplement range. Let's do overseas retreats. Let's do this. So for me, it was just like, I couldn't create fast enough. I was in my zone of just imagine being able to sit down and go, what should we launch tomorrow or next week? And know it's going to go off.
That's you being the classic visionary style entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
And that's where I kind of come into my current role and current journey with the Entourage. And what I've really learned over the last couple of years and it's probably always been there, is like, I like the part of the entrepreneurial journey that I love is building the engine.
Yeah.
Right? Like making sure that we can deliver on our potential.
Yeah.
Making sure that we've got a really, really strong foundation in place so that when we do go and chase those new opportunities, like the rest doesn't fall over.
Yeah.
And so you have, but the visionary entrepreneur is like, let's push forwards, let's look to the future, Buzz Lightyear, infinity and beyond style stuff.
Absolutely.
Which you need, right? Yeah. That's how you set the pace, and that's how you really, you really do amazing things. But then you also need the entrepreneurial flavor of, like, let's make this thing work. Like, let's make it so that we've got a predictable marketing and sales engine.
Yeah.
When we do actually get a huge influx of customers, we service them. We deliver what we promised we're going to do.
Yeah.
And so that's why Jack and I work so well together. Jack is a very typical visionary entrepreneur, brilliant at looking into the future, brilliant at understanding the needs of the customer, kind of joining those dots in a way that no one else can, and he's always like setting this pace of movement and growth. And then what I bring to the table is, okay, like, how do we take that? How do we take the top 20 or 30 ideas, pick maybe the two that we can really nail right now, mobilize the resources around it, make it happen, bed it in, and then we move through the rest of the list of the ideas. And so that's kind of my role in building an entrepreneurial business, is making it kind of like consistent and happen and profitable, and that's all great stuff.